A whole 10 people watched my last video about God and the fall of man, so I'm here to talk about it again. Paradise Lost, John Milton's epic poem, explores the themes of free will, obedience, and the inherent struggle between good and evil. Within its verses, one can take the idea that God, in his omniscience, knew that humanity would ultimately falter. This knowledge raises compelling questions about the nature of free will. If God is all knowing, does that imply that human choices are predetermined? Hi, hello, my name is Griffin the Gecko, and this is my essay titled He Knew All Along While I Build a House I Found on Pinterest in The Sims 4. The Bible and the creation story itself needs no introduction, only the interpretation of people like me who happen to be interested in picking it apart. John Milton, author of When I Consider How My Light Is Spent in Paradise Regained, the topic of today's chat, Paradise Lost, was a poet and civil servant. He wrote Paradise Lost in 1667 during a time of great religious and political upheaval. To catch you up to speed, according to Google AI, Paradise Lost by John Milton is an epic poem that recounts the biblical story of the fall of man. It begins with Satan's rebellion against God and his subsequent banishment to hell. From there, he plots to corrupt God's newest creation, humanity, by tempting Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Their disobedience, resulting in the eating of the forbidden fruit, leads to their expulsion from the paradise and introduction of sin and death into the world. To kick off this ramble that's been sitting in my draft since November, Milton presents the notion that when God foresaw Adam and Eve's transgression, he granted them the gift of free will, allowing them to make their own choices even if those choices would lead to their downfall. This tension between divine omniscience and human autonomy forms the crux of the poem, as it illustrates God's belief in the potential for redemption despite the impending failure. Milton's depiction of the Garden of Eden serves as a backdrop to humanity's initial innocence and subsequent fall. In this paradise, Adam and Eve are portrayed as the ideal human beings, endowed with free will yet faced with the temptation to defy divine command. God's foreknowledge of their eventual disobedience does not strip them of their agency. Instead, it underscores the gravity of their decision. The poem argues that the very essence of their existence, and indeed the existence of all humanity, hinges on the capability to choose between obedience to God and succumbing to temptation. Milton's narrative makes readers reflect on whether humanity's failure was an inevitable outcome or a tragic consequence of exercising free will. Paradise Lost is a mediation on the complexities of human nature and the divine. It suggests that God's recognition of humanity's capacity for failure is not a damning judgment, but rather a testament to the inherent value of free will. Even in foreseeing the fall, God's love and grace remain central to the narrative, offering a glimmer of hope in the promise of redemption for humanity. Thus, Milton's exploration of divine knowledge and human choice becomes a powerful commentary on the nature of existence itself, inviting readers to grapple with the themes of sin, mercy, and the possibility of restoration in the aftermath of failure. Milton, through the figure of Satan, crafts a compelling narrative that presents a provocative argument about power, authority, and justice. At the core of this dispute lies Satan's assertion that God operates as a tyrant, an assertion encapsulated in his famous declaration. Satan's rebellion against God reveals a vision of power that is singular and authoritarian, reflecting not only his grievances but also a deep-seated expectation for shared governance as his rightful claim. This perspective embodies his demand for recognition of free will among the beings in heaven, illustrating the tension between the divine sovereignty and the desire for autonomy. God's power, not in the Bible but as far as Milton is concerned, is derived from his inherent attributes: omnipotence, omniscience, and the boundless goodness of his creation. God, as the creator of the universe, inherently possesses ultimate authority over it. In contrast, Satan's narrative twists as the story's foundation, framing God's excuse of power as an unjust and oppressive imposition that stifles freedom. Satan perceives this divine governance as exhibiting well what could have been a truly moral authority, instead viewing God's rule through a lens of resentment and rebellion. From Satan's perspective, the legitimacy of power should not only stem from divinity, but must also be validated through the exercise of free will and self-determination. His insurrection is poised as a noble quest for autonomy against what he sees as a tyrannical regime. By contrasting God's divine governance with his own aspirations of sovereign leadership, Satan embodies a radical subversion of traditional hierarchies. In his view, the essence of justice is interwoven with the principles of choice and free will. Rather than succumb to the demands of a deity that requires unquestioning allegiance, he becomes a fervent champion of sovereignty over servitude, positioning himself as a liberator of the oppressed. The theme is crystallized in one of Milton's most iconic lines: better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Here, Satan elevates his rebellion to a moral high ground, framing his struggles as one against oppression rather than the mere naked pursuit of power. This rhetorical maneuver allows him to argue that his rule and the establishment of a different order would be more just and more equitable than that of God, who governs with a continuing tyranny and unyielding authority. Throughout Paradise Lost, especially in the opening books, Satan maintains that a rule predicated on individual choice and self governance is inherently superior to God's divine command. He contends that freedom and the ability to make one's choices are fundamental to what constitutes justice. However, the irony in Satan's stance is so profound to me. His concept of freedom is deeply flawed and distorted. While he says that true justice arises from the freedom of choice, his rebellion ultimately challenges the moral order that he seeks to establish, which is a balance between authority and autonomy. Satan's justification for his actions is rooted in a convoluted understanding of free will. He argues that to be truly free, one must be able to choose, even if that choice leads to rebellion against a divinely ordained authority. This presents a paradox, as his quest for freedom leads him to a path of destruction, ultimately culminating in his own eternal suffering. Milton's depiction of Satan thus serves as a cautionary tale about the perils of misinterpreted freedom and anonymous will when unearthed and untethered from moral responsibility. Furthermore, Satan's rhetoric obscures the meaning of justice itself. While he seeks to frame his rebellion as a fight for justice and free will, he fails to recognize that true justice is not merely the absence of tyranny, but involves a mutual relationship that includes respect, responsibility, and accountability. His insistence on pursuing personal sobriety disregard the welfare of others, as evidenced by the chaos he unleashes upon creating following his fall. Milton's exploration of power, authority, and justice through the character of Satan invites readers to reflect on the complexities of morality. By challenging the established divine order and framing his rebellion as a struggle for freedom, Satan reveals not only the flaws in his reasoning, but also the potential damages inherent in a distorted corruption of justice. Ultimately, his journey serves as a reminder of the thin line between freedom and tyranny, as well as the inherent responsibilities that accompany true authority and governance. Through Satan's tale of rebellion, Milton compels us to critically examine the nature of power, the significance of moral authority, and the true meaning of justice in the ongoing struggle between autonomy and divine decree. Satan is depicted as the tragic hero, albeit one who has fallen from grace. His speeches and charismatic presence entirely underscore his formidable intelligence and rhetorical skill. Milton crafts Satan as a complex character whose eloquent monologues reveal a deep, multifaceted psyche. His ambition, rooted in pride and an insatiable desire for power, propels him down a path of deception and malevolence. Satan's speeches unveil his internal conflict. Beneath his relentless quest for vengeance against God, and it lies an unmistakable sense of desperation and alienation. He embodies the archetype tragic hero, not merely for his rebellion against divine authority, but also for his simultaneous acknowledgement of his own subversive, I can't pronounce that word, never mind, his vulnerability. His tragic flaw, an overwhelming hubris, and the refusal to accept his subordinate position, causes his fatal descent in the darkness. Milton's portrayal as Satan compels readers to grapple with the complexities of his character and their own. The once angelic being who was created with immense beauty and intellect now finds himself ensnared in bitterness and envy. His charisma, while alluring, becomes a tool of manipulation and seduction, revealing the perils of unchecked ambition. In essence, Satan transforms into a symbol of tragic disappointment, a being who, in his quest for empowerment and autonomy, ultimately forsakes his original purpose. His angelic splendor is overshadowed by a monstrous ambition, and he tempts humanity. He becomes increasingly isolated and completely consumed by his own malice. And then there's Eve. Eve, on the other hand, is portrayed as the epitome of beauty, innocence, and purity, crafted by God as a companion for Adam. In the idyllic setting of the Garden of Eden, she embodies humanity's untainted state before the fall, representing the nurturing and obedient aspects of creation. Eve's intrinsic qualities shine through her interactions with paradise, where her curiosity about the world around her flourishes. Yet this very curiosity becomes her downfall. Her encounters with the Tree of Knowledge evoke a tragic paradox. They signify the tension between her desire for understanding and the effects of divine law, while her reasoning capacity reflects the profound depths of thought, initially directed towards understanding and nurturing. It too becomes an avenue through which temptation can infiltrate her consciousness. The comparison between Satan and Eve emerges as a compelling theme when examining how both characters navigate the concept of free will. They confront a central issue: the choice between disobedience or obedience to divine will in the pursuit of personal desire. Satan epitomizes a conscious and defiant choice to rebel, driven by his ambition, while Eve reflects a more innocent yet equally consequential choice rooted in exploration and the thirst for knowledge. Their journeys spotlight the duality of human nature, illustrating how the quest for self awareness can lead to both enlightenment and destruction. They are both agents of choice, whose actions reverberate through the narrative and reshape the fate of humanity. Additionally, this mirroring between Satan and Eve highlights a profound irony. While Satan seeks to undermine God's creation, Eve, through her intrinsic curiosity, unwittingly fulfills Satan's desires. Her act of transgression, eating the forbidden fruit, becomes a pivotal moment that instigates the original sin and catalyzes the fall of man. This intersection of their motivations present a nuanced dynamic, showcasing how innocence can be complicit in rebellion. Recognizing the intricate relationship between Satan and Eve prompts a reevaluation of their roles within Milton's epic. The idea is that Eve, in her naivety and curiosity, inadvertently aids in the fulfillment of Satan's goal, introduces a haunting complexity to the narrative. It points to the notion that, even in a state of innocence, one can become unwittingly complicit in acts contrary to divine intent. Conversely, Satan's manipulation of Eve emphasizes the weaponization of free will against the very essence of what is divine: harmony, order, and obedience. It raises questions about the nature of temptation and the morality of choice, revealing how both characters harbor a profound influence on the unfolding of human history. Through the lens of Satan and Eve, Milton invites readers to reflect on the intricate dance of free will, how ambition and desire impact one's choices and moral standing. Their choices forge a path that resonates the struggles of humanity, illuminating the vulnerabilities of both innocence and rebellion. The narrative serves as a reminder of the fragile nature of autonomy, as each decision can lead to unforeseen consequences that alter the very fabric of existence. In this complex interplay, both Satan and Eve emerge not merely as symbols of good and evil, but as reflections of human condition itself, grappling with the weight of choice, consequence, and the inescapable nature of their respective fates. In sum, the story of Satan and Eve becomes a timeless exploration of ambition, innocence, and the moral dilemmas that define the human experience in the face of divine authority. The notion that Eve succumbs to temptation can be seen as both a deliberate act of disobedience and a necessary component of God's overarching plan for humanity. John Milton's Paradise Lost is rich with theological and philosophical implications that invite deeper analysis into the nature of free will, temptation, moral responsibility, and all of the things that I've already discussed. The complex interplay of these themes is central to understanding Eve's character and her role in the larger narrative of humanity's fall from grace. Milton leaves open the possibility that Eve is not entirely accountable for her actions, weaving a complex interaction between divine intervention and free will throughout the text. In Book 9, Eve's fall begins with her isolation from Adam, who, according to the creation narrative, was appointed to be her companion and protector. This separation serves as the catalyst for a series of events that will culminate in their collective downfall. In the absence of Adam, Eve encounters the serpent, who represents the very essence of chaos and seduction. The serpent, described in a manner that evokes both cunning and charm, manipulates Eve by appealing to her innate curiosity, a trait that, while a gift of her creator, also renders her vulnerable to deception. Satan's role as the tempter becomes critical in this dynamic. The term, the tempter, is employed repeatedly throughout Book 9, illustrating an active and potent force of manipulation. The dialogue between the tempter and Eve reveals the disturbing power of temptation as Eve engages with it, embodying both agency and susceptibility. Her choice to converse with the serpent signifies an exercise of free will, yet it occurs against a backdrop of intense psychological and spiritual coercion. Here, Milton raises profound questions about the nature of human volition. To what extent can one be held accountable for their actions when they are influenced by external forces? One of the prevailing themes woven throughout Paradise Lost is the concept of divine foreknowledge. If God possesses omniscience, then Eve's actions may be viewed as a part of preordained plan. From this perspective, her fall becomes a necessary condition for the eventual redemption that underpins the narrative arc of Christianity as a whole. The implications of this theological stance are huge, as they challenge the reader to reflect on the nature of sin and the potential for redemption. If Eve's transgression was foreseen and somehow integrated into the divine scheme, to what extent can she, and by extension humanity, be held fully responsible for her actions? Milton suggests that Eve executes for free will, but her choices unfold within a framework meticulously constructed by divine wisdom. This interplay between free will and omnipotence becomes critical in understanding Eve's role within the cosmic scheme. The notion of moral agency in a predestined world complicates the traditional views of sin and responsibility, positioning Eve not merely as a vilified figure, but as a participant in this grand narrative woven by God and divine intent. In Book 12, the question of accountability is revisited with a focus on the ramifications that arise from Adam and Eve's choices. Here, the Archangel Michael um, explains the importance and implications of their actions, highlighting the moral complexity and the suffering that will ensue as a consequence of their disobedience. The narrative suggests that while Adam and Eve fall into sin, the potential for salvation exists through repentance and divine grace. This introduces a glimmer of hope amid despair, indicating that redemption is always accessible regardless of the gravity of one's transgressions. In this light, Melton seems to propose a duality of Eve's culpability. She's an active participant in her choice, yet her actions unfold within a broader context that hints at divine purpose. Yes, Eve does decide to disobey God, but her fall is inextricably linked to factors beyond her control, including the intricate manipulation by the serpent and the overarching divine plan that governs creation. This tension highlights the complexity of the human experience where agency and predestination coexist, creating a nuanced understanding of the nature of existence and sin. Milton doesn't portray Eve as a villain. Rather, he presents her as a tragic figure, emblematic of the human condition, caught in the tension between aspirations and moral failure. And he does the same thing with Satan. Eve's story initiates a crucial discourse on the nature of sin, responsibility, and redemption. Her journey encapsulates the struggle of humanity, illustrating how individuals grapple with temptation, the weight of their choices, and the quest for forgiveness in a world that often seems determined by forces beyond their comprehension. Through Eve and Satan, Milton invites readers to ponder the intricate levels of the human experience, fostering an understanding that transcends simplistic notions of guilt and blame, instead recognizing the profound complexities inherent in the human soul's journey towards redemption. Thank you for hanging out with me. If you listened to any of that, thank you so, so much. But if you muted it, my voice is kind of annoying, and I do understand, just to watch The Sims build. I hope you enjoyed it. It was kind of rough. There are some windows in this house that do not exist in the game, and I fought for a very, very long time to find the right windows. Anyways, I appreciate you sending all the love, sending all the good vibes. I hope everything is going well for you and your family and your friends. Anyways, I will talk to you guys later. Bye.